What's up, y'all? It's Chata Kevin, and in this video, let's go over what is a spell. Utan Afinan. When I say spell, what do we think of? We think of abracadabra, or how to write a word. Hey, how do you spell that word? Why do we use that and not how do you write that word? Ever thought of that? In Old English, we have the word that spell, which has many meanings. Well, first off, it's a neuter noun, so for those of you who don't know or are still in the beginnings, if you will, of learning Old English, that is neuter as a article. Anyway, one of the many meanings of that spell is that the word itself means story or narrative or account. You know, let's say something happened to you and your friend, and you tell your other friends about it, and in that context, you would use spell. Another context of how the word that spell could be is kind of, if you will, an argument. More specifically, kind of a philosophical argument, kind of an instructive talk, more like a discourse, if you will. An example of this from Old English literature would be like sermons, or because the thing is, a lot of literature in Old English is actually written about God and Jesus and all that stuff, and because a lot of the works that we have, for example, Alfric's Lives of the Saints is one example, and there are many many works that are written in Old English about Christianity and whatnot. But more or less, you could argue that spell is kind of like saying your argument, your discourse. And I say discourse because the verb actually to talk or to discourse in Old English is spellian. So it's spellia that. So I talk that, if you will, if that makes any sense. Yeah, because the word talk didn't exist back then. You had spellian back then, but let us move on. Now, another context of how the word that spell could be used would be a saying, or kind of like, again, going back to it being an argument, but more in the context of a point about something. It could be, in some contexts, it could mean sentence. It could be, and when think about that, think about spells as the way we know them today. What literally are they? They are just written like phrases, sentences that you say out loud. You know, as we see in television and films and whatnot, and if you think about it more or less, spells are just messages, if you will. If you were to sum it all up, really. But in the context of what I'm saying in this part is that it could be a saying, it could be a remark, it could be a point you're trying to make. But hang on here. I'd like to go back on what I said earlier in this video of how people say today, how do you spell that? You know, but deep down, well, the thing is, we live in a world where we write everything, but let us put ourselves back where fewer people wrote things, and so if you think about it, when somebody would say, "How do you spell that?" It's kind of like also saying, if you will, let us imagine at this point, how do you talk that? Because what letters do I have to say in order to make this a specific word? If that makes any sense. But let us move on. Another context of how that spell could be in Old English is that it could be another word for speech, but in the context of language of prose. Now, what is prose as opposed to poetry? Prose is a kind of speech which is non-poetic. It's how people regularly speak, if you will, or it could be in the form of government documents, like government documents, or if you will, in the context of Old English, letters to the king or the king writing letters. That would be in prose and not poetry. Beowulf is obviously poetry. And now I would like to go over some vocabulary that has spell as a prefix. So to give you guys more of an insight of how the word spell was kind of integrated in other places of the Old English language. Let's begin. Uton yenan. The first word I'd like to go over is a masculine noun, therefore it uses the masculine article of sa, meaning the, and it is spellboda. Now, this word means, well, thing is, let's chop it up, if you will. Now that we learned what spell means, it means more or less message, saying, and all that. So spell and boda means messenger, or if you will, ambassador. So an ambassador that brings messages, or in the context of that. But it can this word spell boda can also mean public speaker. Well, you could argue that I'm a spell boarder. I do make YouTube videos, and I bring a discourse to the public about Old English. So I guess that could fall into that word, but let's move on. The second word I would like to go over that has spell as a prefix is spell stole, and which is a feminine noun, so therefore it would be seo, spell stole. So, and what does this word mean? Well, knowing that spell is about messages and sayings and all things about talking, if you will, and stole means place. So, talking, saying, place. So, therefore, in its definition, it's in a nutshell, it means a place where announcements are made. I mean, the word spellion, the verb to speak and whatnot, it can also mean, in some contexts, mean to announce, to proclaim, to tell, if you will. The reasons I made this video is that I kind of want to dismantle this idea that when we think of spells, we think of magic. We think of like Harry Potter, abracadabra, and all that. And it's just I want to bring out what people back then thought of the word spell itself. Now, for magic and all that, I think I'll make a video about that in another video, even though it's not really my field, even though I'm heavily interested in it, don't get me wrong. But to give you a sneak peek of among one of the words that the Anglo-Saxons use for like a spell as far as sorcery, one of them would be Galdor, and its Old Norse cognate is Galdr, which, I mean, Galdor also has to do with the verb yellian, if I'm correct, which evolved into the Anglian verb yellan, and which evolved into what we know now as to yell. So anyway, I'm not going to dwell into that in this video. I just want to talk about what a spell is in the context of Old English, and kind of disclose what my previous video was, because I don't want people thinking. I should have made a little introduction of what a spell is in that video, but I kind of want to make that previous video kind of separate on its own. Kind of, I'd rather have a video like this to explain fully what a spell is. In the context of spell, the way I used it in that previous video was pardon me, the context that it's kind of an argument, kind of a message I want to say to the public, if you will, an idea. And in this previous video, to sum it up, it's all about tradition. Thank you for watching my video. Be sure to like this video. Be sure to subscribe, like my Facebook, and follow my Twitter. But I usually post videos every Saturday, but the way things are going now in my life, I pretty much post whenever I can, really. But if anything, for those of you who are new, I do let my subscribers know what's going on, because I do care about this channel. And I'm so surprised how much it has grown since I started. Anyway, links are down below. Thanks for watching, and Wezoth Yehad.